Nazi Germany, August 1934. Instead of swearing allegiance to the German constitution, the military modifies its oath of loyalty to the Führer personally, promising unconditional obedience. The Führer succeeds in rebuilding the German military following the humiliating reductions of the Versailles Treaty after World War I. He promises the opportunity to fight their enemies in France and the Bolshevist Soviet Union, and finally, many generals receive systematic bribes from Hitler in the form of extra pay, grants, and even gifts of lands and estates. Despite this, the highest-ranking officers in the German army find a common ground that enables them to work with Hitler. The Einsatzgruppen, or Nazi mobile killing squads, operate in the rear of the German lines and carry out the systematic mass murder of 1.5 to 2 million Jewish men, women, and children throughout the East. The German military knowingly supports these groups after the Second World War broke out on September 1, 1939, and particularly after the Soviet invasion in June 1941. Nonetheless, a large number of German military personnel kill or assist in the murder of Jews, as well as of disabled individuals, Roma, civilians from Eastern Europe, and POWs. German General Anton Dossler is one such member of the armed forces. On May 10, 1891, Anton Dossler was born in Munich, which was then a part of the German Empire. Dossler, who was 19 at the time, enlisted as a cadet in the Bavarian Army's 6th Infantry Regiment in June 1910, and 2 years later, he was elevated to lieutenant. The 28th of July, 1914 marked the start of the First World War. Dossler received promotions in January 1916 to Oberleutnant, which was the same as first lieutenant, and in October 1918 to Hauptmann, which was the same as captain. He received the Bavarian Military Honor Order, the kingdom's primary distinction for valor and military honor for officers and higher-ranking officials, as well as both grades of the Iron Cross for his valor in action. When German officials signed the armistice in the French forest of Compiègne on November 11, 1918, the First World War came to an end. Dossler was a member of the newly established Reichswehr, or German Army, which had a manpower cap of 100,000 during the Weimar Republic, the name given to the German government from 1918 to 1933. He started attending the nearby university and was promoted to major in 1932 after being moved to the Military Intelligence Division of the Reichswehr Ministry in Berlin on October 1, 1924. In January 1933, Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party took control of the country. According to Nazi racial law, the military forbade Jews from enlisting in 1935 and expelled those who were already there. Hitler became the supreme leader of the German armed forces in 1938. By this point, the Wehrmacht had been Nazified since Hitler had won the military's respect and awe by occupying areas like Austria and portions of Czechoslovakia without going to war. Furthermore, by that point, a large number of young troops had enlisted in the military directly from the Reich Labor Services and the Hitler Youth Program. Despite their disapproval of the Nazis' atrocities during Germany's invasion of Poland, some commanders remained silent when Germany defeated France in May and June 1940 in a stunning demonstration of military force. The Einsatzgruppen carried out the systematic mass murder of 1.5 to 2 million Jewish men, women, and children throughout the East with the help of the German army during the invasion of the Soviet Union, known as Operation Barbarossa, which began on June 22, 1941. Through its own reports and liaison personnel, the army was well informed about the activities of these groups. Nearly none of the officers objected to Hitler's savage directives about the ideological war against the Soviet Union. Hitler's inability to adhere to the initial invasion schedule was the primary grievance of Wehrmacht officers prior to the commencement of Operation Barbarossa. Anton Dossler commanded the 57th Infantry Division, which participated in the operation as a component of Army Group South and attacked Kiev when Germany and its allies attacked the Soviet Union. Walter von Reichenau, an ardent Nazi, led Army Group South, which collaborated with the SS Einsatzgruppen to carry out the Babi Yar massacre. Under Einsatzgruppe C's command, SS and German police units and their auxiliary forces killed Kiev's Jewish residents on September 29 and 30, 1941, in Babi Yar, a ravine northwest of the city. During World War II, this was one of the biggest mass killings at a single site. The Einsatzgruppen reported to headquarters that 33,771 Jews had been slaughtered in 2 days. Women, children, the elderly, the sick, and those who had been unable to escape earlier made up the majority of those slaughtered. Dossler led the 163rd Infantry Division from June to December 1942. The division fought with the Finnish Army in 1941 during Operation Barbarossa against the Soviet Union and then stayed in Finland for the majority of the war until the Germans withdrew from Finland and returned to Norway in the fall of 1944. Dossler received a promotion to General Lieutenant, the equivalent of Major General, on January 1, 1943. He then filled in for a few temporary positions at Corps. An Italian general named Badoglio declared Italy's unconditional surrender to the Allies on September 8, 1943. Italy had previously supported Nazi Germany. The Italian zones in Yugoslavia, Greece, and France, as well as northern and central Italy, were swiftly taken over by the Germans, who had become skeptical of Italian objectives. Benito Mussolini, the leader of the Italian fascist movement, was liberated from prison by SS paratroopers and established as the leader of the pro-German Italian Social Republic, which was headquartered in Salo, northern Italy. Dossler was named commander of the 75th Army Corps in January 1944. The 75th Army Corps was established in Frankfurt am Main on January 15, 1944. The Corps was placed on transit to Liguria, Italy, via Munich and Verona on January 24, 1944. In addition to anti-partisan activities and the building of fortifications on the Elbe and in the vicinity of Genoa, La Spezia, and Livorno, the Corps was given responsibility for the coastal defense of the Ligurian coast. This continued until the front line arrived in Liguria from the south in the middle of July 1944. As part of Operation Ginny 2, 15 U.S. Army men, including 2 officers, landed on the Italian shore on March 22, 1944, around 15 kilometers north of La Spezia, 400 kilometers, 250 miles, behind the then-established front. They all wore the U.S. Army's field uniform appropriately and didn't have any civilian clothing on them. Their goal was to destroy a tunnel on the crucial railway route that connects Genoa and La Spezia at Fremura. A joint detachment of German Army and Italian fascist soldiers captured the group 2 days later. They were brought to La Spezia and imprisoned close to the 135th Fortress Brigade's headquarters, which was commanded by German Colonel Kurt Almers. General Anton Dossler, the commander of the 75th Army Corps, was his direct superior. Wehrmacht intelligence personnel questioned the American party that had been captured, and one of them disclosed the mission. Dossler at the 75th Army Corps headquarters was then notified of the details, including the fact that it was a commando raid. The next day, he asked his commander, Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, who was in charge of all German forces in Italy, what should be done with the American commandos that had been seized. In response, Kesselring reportedly ordered the execution, according to Dossler's adjutant. In accordance with Adolf Hitler's Commando Order of 1942, which mandated that all Allied commandos captured in Europe and Africa be summarily executed without trial, even if they were wearing the proper uniforms or made an attempt to surrender, Dossler later that day sent a telegram to the 135th Fortress Brigade directing that the captured commando party be put to death. Colonel Almers approached Dossler once more to ask him to postpone the death order because he felt unhappy about it. Dossler responded by sending another telegraph directing Almers to execute the command as given. Colonel Almers made 2 final attempts to halt the execution, some of which were conducted over the phone, because he was aware that the 1929 Geneva Convention on Prisoners of War prohibited the execution of uniformed POWs. His pleas were not heard, and on the morning of March 26, 1944, the 15 Americans involved in the commando raid were killed near Punta Bianca, in the municipality of Ameglia, south of La Spezia. Their bodies were interred in a mass grave that was later hidden following this execution, which was more of a massacre. Unaware of Hitler's commando order, Alexander zu Donaueschleuden, a member of Dassler's staff, was expelled from the Wehrmacht for insubordination after refusing to sign the order for the American commandos' execution. General Dassler's life continued on as usual following the execution of 15 American POWs. He was sent to the 73rd Army Corps in November 1944, where he served out the remainder of the war. When Dassler was captured by the U.S. Army as a prisoner of war, justice finally caught up with him. After the Americans learned of the fate of the Commando Raiding Party, General Dassler had his day in court and was tried for war crimes on May 8, 1945, in contrast to the 15 soldiers he had executed. On October 8, 1945, a military trial was convened at the Royal Palace in Caserta, Italy, which served as the seat of the Supreme Allied Commander. He was charged with carrying out an unlawful command that resulted in the deaths of 15 American prisoners of war at the first Allied war crimes trial. He argued that the order to execute 15 men was legal and that he had not given it, rather, he had just relayed it to Field Marshal Kesselring's Colonel Almers. The tribunal rejected Dassler's argument of superior commands, concluding that he had acted independently of the Führer's orders when he ordered the mass killing. His request for clemency was likewise denied by the Military Commission, which ruled that the mass execution of the Commando Group violated Article 2 of the 1929 Geneva Convention on Prisoners of War, which forbade retaliation against POWs. No soldier, unless a commanding general, can be heard to say that he considered the summary shooting of prisoners of war legitimate, even as a reprisal, the Commission said in its ruling. Executing spies and saboteurs disguised in civilian clothing or enemy uniforms was permitted by the 1907 Hague Convention on Land Warfare, but not those apprehended wearing their own army's uniform. The 15 American troops should have been treated as prisoners of war rather than spies because they were appropriately dressed in American uniforms behind enemy lines and weren't disguised in either civilian clothing or enemy uniforms. Dassler had broken this rule by carrying out the death order. The superior orders defense was dismissed at trial because Dassler claimed that only his superiors could be held accountable because he had authorized the executions because he was carrying out orders from above. Dassler's defense was rejected by the court-martial, which prevented the accused from arguing that they were merely carrying out orders. This decision created a significant precedent for the prosecution of Nazi war criminals at Nuremberg a few months later. General Dassler was judged guilty of war crimes by an American military tribunal on October 12, 1945, and given a death sentence by musketry. On December 1, 1945, just after daylight, Anton Dassler, then 54, was taken to the execution party by the prisoner guard. After reading the charge, the finding, and the punishment out loud, the responsible officer gave Dassler a quick meeting with a Roman Catholic chaplain. After that, things happened fast. With his hands behind his back, 3 soldiers fastened him to a pole. A medical officer then covered Dassler's head with a black hood and fastened a 4-inch white target over his heart. The officer in charge ordered the gunfire to begin after a 12-man firing squad had taken up positions 50 feet away from Dassler. Dassler's corpse sagged forward, lifeless, as the shots echoed one another. Both still and motion pictures of the execution were captured on camera. Dassler's body was taken to a stretcher, covered with a white cotton mattress cover, transported in an army truck, and interred at the German War Cemetery in Pomezia, Italy, just after the execution. The idea that the German military was not involved in the Holocaust or other acts of genocide and had only engaged in a conventional fight against their adversaries, including the Soviet Union, emerged almost immediately after the war ended. This mythology started at Nuremberg, where the military was not considered a criminal organization but the SS was. The high command members were the only ones put on trial for war crimes. Furthermore, in post-war Germany, military prosecutions were essentially non-existent. Ongoing research, however, demonstrates the extent to which the German military voluntarily and deeply backed Hitler and took part in the mass murder of Jews and other populations the Nazis targeted in addition to using forced labor. For Anton Dossler, no tears were shed. We appreciate your time and hope to see you on the channel again soon. Please click the bell notification symbol to ensure you don't miss our upcoming episodes.